Your husband created a navigable waterway without board approval, Marlene shrieked, her voice cracking across my yard like a snapped power line. And I will not have maritime chaos in Willow Ridge Estates. If that sounds dramatic, trust me, it felt worse at 6 in the morning with dew still clinging to the grass and half the neighborhood peeking through their blinds. I hadn't even had coffee yet, but there she was, our beloved HOA president, marching toward me in her purple windbreaker like a suburban general on a mission. She clutched her clipboard as if it were a holy tablet. Behind her, I could see Mrs. Eldridge from Lot 14 pretending to walk her dog, though her chihuahua clearly wanted nothing to do with the situation. My phone buzzed nonstop with neighbor group chat messages. And the entire time, the soft glimmer of my husband's new pond hour. Entirely legal, entirely private, pond winked behind her as if it were in on the joke. But before I get to the part where Marlene accused us of hydrological warfare, I should rewind to the moment she burst into our yard like she expected to find a pirate ship anchored there. It started with a sharp knock-no, more like a series of impatient thuds at our back gate. I stepped outside in my slippers, rubbing sleep out of my eyes, only to find Marlene already halfway onto my property. "Do you mind?" I asked, pulling the gate closed behind her. "You're trespassing. I'm conducting an emergency compliance check," she said. Her tone suggested she was inspecting a toxic spill rather than a perfectly serene pond with a few decorative stones. Sunlight was just starting to creep over the rooftops, turning the water a warm amber. Birds chirped. It was peaceful. Very threatening, apparently. She planted her hands on her hips. "Explain this," she demanded, gesturing at the pond like it had personally insulted her. "It's a pond," I said. "A water feature. On our land. A suspicious body of water," she snapped. "Your husband excavated after hours, and according to Section 14B of the Willow Ridge Code of Aesthetic Standards, no homeowner may undertake major landscaping modifications without written approval from the board. I sent the request 3 weeks ago," I said. "You stamped it denied because you didn't like the word naturalistic." "Naturalistic is code for uncontrolled," she corrected, flipping through her clipboard. "Uncontrolled leads to algae. Algae leads to mosquitoes. Mosquitoes lead to property value decline." "You made that up?" I said. She huffed. "Maybe. But it could happen." While we were arguing, 2 more neighbors wandered by, pretending to stretch or adjust their mailboxes. I could feel eyes on us from every direction. The smell of someone's morning bacon drifted through the air, and my stomach growled loudly enough that Marlene gave me a disapproving look. Then she pointed the tip of her pen at the water. "Where did it come from?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "It wasn't there yesterday." "Well, yes, 'cause he finished lining it yesterday and filled it overnight." Her eyes widened like I had confessed to a crime. "Overnight, under cover of darkness." She scribbled something on her paper. "Suspicious. Marlene, it's a pond, not a clandestine bunker." At that exact moment, my husband, Michael, stepped onto the patio holding 2 mugs. "Morning," he said casually, as though a tiny HOA coup wasn't unfolding on our lawn. Marlene spun toward him. "Did you or did you not dig this lake to antagonize me personally?" He blinked. "What?" "This reeks of retaliation. Because I denied your request for blue holiday lights last winter." "That was 7 months ago," he said. "Pretty sure I've moved on. Have you?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. He held up a mug. "Coffee?" She ignored the offer. "You violated 5 bylaws," she declared. "Minimum." "Name one," my husband challenged. She flipped a page. Section 1, to see, unauthorized excavation. Section 5A, potential disruption to neighborhood harmony. Section 2OF, structures likely to cause jealousy among adjacent residents. "That last one doesn't exist," I said. "It should," she muttered. I was about to tell her to leave when she delivered her next threat with the relish of someone announcing a surprise birthday party they planned exclusively for themselves. "Until I determine the legality of this water feature, the HOA will be placing a temporary lien on your property. My jaw dropped. A lien? For a pond. A suspicious pond, she corrected. You don't have the authority to do that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I absolutely do, she replied. Her eyes sparkled with self-satisfaction. I'm the president. The board has to vote, I said. You can't unilaterally impose something like that. She hesitated for half a second, long enough that I knew she knew I was right, but then her expression hardened. I'll call an emergency meeting, she said. Tonight, I strongly suggest you prepare your case. She turned on her heel and strode toward the gate, barking over her shoulder. Do not touch, modify, or expand the waterway until further notice. I will be conducting a series of surveys to confirm the boundary lines. Surveys? Michael asked. Yes, she said, pausing dramatically. To ensure your so-called pond hasn't encroached on HOA easements. It's 10 feet from the easement, I said. So you claim. She slammed the gate behind her. The moment she was gone, the neighbors scattered like pigeons. My phone buzzed against someone had already posted in the group chat. Did you see the Withers versus Pond incident? I closed my eyes, inhaling the earthy smell of wet soil. She's not going to drop this, I murmured. No, my husband said. She's going to escalate. And he was right, because less than an hour later, Marlene sent us an official HOA-wide announcement titled Potential Environmental Threat Identified on Lot 23, and the real storm began. I'm placing this sign here under the authority of the Willow Ridge Board, Marlene announced, slapping a laminated red nay white notice onto my fence. From this moment on, the HOA shares jurisdiction over this waterway. For a second, all I could do was stare at the sign flapping in the morning breeze like it was marking the edge of some disputed border. The smell of pine mulch from my neighbor's yard hung in the air, almost mocking the absurdity of what I was witnessing. Marlene looked pleased with herself, the kind of pleased usually reserved for villains revealing their final form. Behind her, a few dog walkers pretended to loiter, clearly hoping for a live sequel to yesterday's drama. My pond sparkled innocently in the sunlight, unaware that it had apparently become the subject of a territorial dispute. My phone vibrated with fresh HOA notifications, and I didn't need to read them to know who they were from. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint, tragic honking of a lone goose, as if nature itself wanted in on the gossip. It all started an hour earlier, when I stepped outside to find Marlene pacing beside my fence with a tape measure dangling from her wrist. She kept glancing between the pond and a stack of laminated signs she had tucked under her arm. What now? I asked, tightening my robe. The early air carried a damp, earthy chill that crept through the fabric. I reviewed last night's emergency meeting minutes, she said, flipping open her clipboard. Given the potential hazards, the board is initiating shared jurisdiction of the area. Hazards? I echoed. It's a pond, not a radioactive crater. She lowered her voice, as if preparing to deliver an urgent national alert. There are concerns about waterfowl, like ducks. Specifically, she said, geese. Migratory ones. They can sense water. They can smell it. And they travel in packs. She paused dramatically, letting the horror settle. You're telling people we built a pond to lure a goose army into the neighborhood? I asked. Marlene held up her clipboard again. I am merely reporting the concerns circulating among residents. Many believe your husband created a habitat designed to tank local property values. Before I could respond, a notification pinged on my phone. Another message thread had erupted in the neighborhood group chat. Is it true the pond will attract geese? My cousin said geese are aggressive. Is this going to impact the annual garden walk? I sighed. Group chat hysteria was spreading faster than mosquitoes ever could. Marlene, I said, we didn't build it for geese. We built it because we like the sound of water. So you claim. She reached into her tote bag and produced the laminated "No Trespassing" sign like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. This is for your protection as well as ours. She slapped it onto the fence with a strip of industrial-strength adhesive. The sharp scent of the glue mixed with the morning air, oddly acrid. I crossed my arms. You can't put signs on private property without permission. That's a violation. Not when it concerns shared hazards, she sniffed. Shared hazards that you invented. Her jaw tightened. Well, unfortunately for you, the board takes environmental threats seriously, which is why I've taken the liberty of hiring an aquatic compliance inspector. I didn't like the sound of that. You hired who? Inspector Hal Brubaker, she announced proudly. A specialist in pond safety, waterway regulations, and habitat management. The name sounded suspiciously familiar. Before I could place it, a rusted pickup rolled up to the curb. Out stepped a balding man in cargo shorts and a faded fishing vest, holding what appeared to be a gas station brand clipboard. He adjusted his sunglasses and strutted toward us like he expected applause. "Marlene," I whispered, "is that your cousin from the 4th of July barbecue?" She hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion. "He prefers the term aquatic compliance inspector," she said softly. Hal ambled up, took a loud slurp from an energy drink, and nodded at my pond. "Yup, that there's water." "Very observant," I said. He squatted near the shoreline stones, poking the water with a stick he clearly picked up on the way over. "Depth looks pondish," he murmured. Marlene beamed as if he had delivered a doctoral thesis. I exchanged a look with Michael, who had just stepped outside and stopped mid-sip of his coffee. Is he measuring the pond with a stick?" "Yes," I said grimly. "Apparently, that's science now." Hal stood and scribbled something on his clipboard. "Could be hazards here," he announced. "Could be none. Hard to say. I'll need to run a full inspection." "A full what?" I asked. He grinned. "Gonna need to bring my waders." Marlene nodded solemnly. "You see, this is precisely why I initiated shared jurisdiction. For the safety of the community," I was about to argue when a new voice called from the sidewalk. It was Sandra from 2 streets over, waving her phone. "Is it true, Marlene? Your appraisal dropped 8% last quarter." Marlene glared at her. "That information is private." Sandra shrugged. "Well, it's on the county website." Meanwhile, Lot 23 got a 15% boost. Waterfront views, you know? A spark of realization flickered through the growing crowd. I shifted from Marlene to the pond. To me, back to Marlene. Her face turned the same shade as the no trespassing sign. Without another word, she spun away, muttering something about protocols and confidentiality. Hal jogged after her, nearly tripping over his own clipboard. The neighbors dispersed slowly, whispering like bees around a hive. I turned to Michael. "She's jealous." He nodded. "And desperate." I glanced at the sign still stuck to our fence. The red letters glared back at me like a warning. "If she's escalating," I said quietly, "this isn't the worst of it." He followed my gaze toward the street where Marlene had disappeared. "What do you think she'd do next?" I swallowed. "Something she'll regret," because 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message didn't come from the group chat. It came directly from the HOA board. Urgent notice. Mandatory hearing scheduled for tomorrow evening regarding alleged major violations on Lot 23. Attendance required, and just like that, things went from petty to dangerous. "I have here," I said, holding the folder high enough for the packed room to see, the exact property line records that prove Marlene tried to annex 13 feet of my backyard to the HOA. The room erupted. A few gasps, a whispered, "Oh my God," even the sound of someone's metal water bottle clattering to the floor. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, giving everything a courtroom glow. Marlene froze beside the projector screen, her hand still on the clicker mid-transition. Her slide show-titled in giant red letters. The lake that threatens our way of life hovered behind her like a badly written movie poster. I could practically hear the tension crackle as every face in that crowded multi-purpose room turned toward her, waiting for her reaction. She opened her mouth, then shut it. For once, the Queen of Willow Ridge had no immediate comeback. But to get to that moment, we had to survive the long, dramatic build-up. The meeting had been scheduled for 7, but by 6:30 people were already lining up outside the clubhouse. When I stepped inside, I caught the sharp smell of old carpet and lemon-scented disinfectant. Folding chairs filled every corner, occupied by neighbors clutching notebooks, iced teas, and a thirst for drama. Marlene stood at the front, wearing a blazer the color of overripe cherries, adjusting her projector like she was preparing for a TED Talk no one asked for. "Welcome," she announced, voice dripping with authority. "Tonight we address a growing environmental and community concern. The artificial lake constructed by Lot 23. It's a pond," someone muttered. Marlene clicked the remote and a slide popped up, showing a zoomed-in, unflattering photo of my backyard, taken from a suspicious angle. "This structure threatens neighbor safety, harmony, and property values," she proclaimed. "I have compiled visual evidence." The screen shifted to another slide, this one labeled Pond of Peril. I sat calmly in the third row, my folder resting on my knees. Michael squeezed my hand. "Ready?" he whispered. "Oh," I said, "so ready." Marlene clicked again, revealing a slide of geese photoshopped onto my lawn. "As you can see," she said, "waterfowl activity has already begun. These birds can be aggressive. They can." I stood. "I have something to say." A collective rustle swept the room. Marlene stiffened, lowering her clicker like a weapon. "You may speak during the homeowner comment period," she said sharply. "No," I replied. "I'm speaking now." Her jaw tightened. "Fine," she snapped. "But be brief." I walked to the front, heels clicking on the laminate floor. I could feel the eyes following me, people leaning in as though I were carrying a live grenade instead of a folder. "First," I said, turning to the room, "let's talk about the so-called hazard." I flipped open the folder and pulled out a time-stamped photo of my yard. The pond, serene and clean, glowed gold in the afternoon sun. This is the actual state of the water feature. No geese, no hazards, no violations of any code. I handed the photo to the board secretary, who studied it before passing it along. Murmurs rose like a low tide. "Second," I said, "here are the land survey maps." I unfolded the papers with deliberate slowness. These show the exact property boundaries. The pond is entirely within Lot 23, fully compliant. What was not compliant, however, I turned and looked straight at Marlene, was the presence of someone else on that land. Gasps rippled. Marlene scoffed. I was conducting an inspection, without board approval, without notice, and without legal authority. I held up a printed security still showing Marlene stepping over my boundary line at 6 in the morning. This is trespassing. The room buzzed louder. "And that's not all," I continued. "I have a witness." All heads swung toward the back as Sandra stepped forward, holding a stack of emails. "These," she said, "are messages from Marlene to the newsletter committee." She altered official HOA updates to imply that the pond was under board review before any vote occurred. The committee chair's eyes went wide. She told us it was approved. It wasn't, Sandra said. Even the board treasurer, who normally sided with Marlene on everything from pet leash lengths to mailbox paint sheen, leaned forward with a frown. I wasn't done. "And finally," I said, producing the appraisal documents, Marlene's personal motivation, I passed them to the board. Her property value dropped significantly after a recent inspection. Meanwhile, ours increased. She attempted to claim part of our land as an easement to artificially raise her own appraisal. The room fell into a heavy, absolute silence. Marlene backed away, pale, muttering that everything was fabricated, but even her loyalists had turned. When the vice president called for her removal, nearly every hand, including Hal's, shot up. The vote was swift, brutal, final. My pond was declared fully permitted, and applause thundered through the room. Relief washed over me just as my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think this is over? You're wrong. I glanced toward the door where a figure slipped into the darkness. The victory tasted sweet, but a new threat was already forming.